The dust from the stagecoach still hung in the air when Clara Whitmore stumbled into the town of Redemption, Texas. Her black mourning dress caked with trail dirt and her eyes hollow as empty wells. It was late summer in 1878, and the heat shimmered off the wooden boardwalks like waves of sorrow, matching the grief that had carved deep lines into her 23-year-old face. She carried nothing but a worn carpet bag and the weight of 3 tiny graves she had left behind in Missouri, each one a piece of her heart buried in the unforgiving earth. The town spread before her like a promise she did not dare believe in anymore. False-fronted buildings lined the main street, their weathered wood bleached pale by the relentless sun. A saloon stood on one corner, its painted sign proclaiming it the Lucky Dollar. Across the street, a general store displayed bolts of calico in the window. Further down, she could see the marshal's office, a blacksmith's forge, and at the far end of town, a small white church with a steeple that reached toward heaven like an accusation. Clara's hands trembled as she gripped her bag tighter. She had come here to escape the whispers, the pitying looks, the way women crossed themselves when she passed, and mothers pulled their children closer as if death itself clung to her skirts. 3 pregnancies in 4 years of marriage. 3 beautiful babies who had drawn breath for only days before the fever took them, one after another, as if God himself had marked her womb as cursed ground. Her husband had buried the last child, and then himself in a bottle of whiskey before putting a bullet through his own head 6 months ago. The town had blamed her for that too, said her curse had driven him to madness, said she was touched by something dark and unholy. The preacher had refused to speak at his funeral, and Clara had known then that she could not stay. She made her way to the boarding house, a 2-story structure with a sign that read, Mrs. Hoffman's Rooms. The woman who answered her knock was stout and gray-haired, with sharp eyes that assessed Clara from head to toe in a single sweeping glance. "I need a room," Clara said, her voice hoarse from 3 days of travel with little water and less conversation. "I can pay for a week in advance." Mrs. Hoffman's expression softened slightly at the sight of Clara's mourning clothes. "Just arrived." "Yes, ma'am, on the stage from Austin." "You got people here in Redemption?" "No, ma'am, I am starting fresh. I hoped I might find work." The older woman studied her for a long moment, and Clara forced herself to meet her gaze steadily. She had learned that looking away only made people more suspicious, more certain that the rumors were true. "I have a room on the 2nd floor," Mrs. Hoffman said finally. $3 a week includes breakfast and supper. You will share the washroom with 2 other ladies who board here. Both are respectable, and I expect the same from you." "Yes, ma'am, thank you." Clara counted out the coins from her small purse, watching her carefully hoarded funds diminish. She had enough money to last perhaps a month if she was careful. After that, she would need employment, and she knew from bitter experience that opportunities for women with her reputation were few and far between. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out over the back alley. Clara set down her bag and sank onto the bed, her body finally releasing the tension she had carried for days. For a moment, just a moment, she allowed herself to remember little Thomas, who had lived for 5 days and had her husband's dark eyes. Sweet Mary, who had fought for 7 days before the fever won, her tiny fingers wrapped around Clara's thumb even as her breathing grew shallow. And Samuel, her last hope, who had seemed so strong, so healthy, until the 3rd day when the sickness came on sudden and vicious, taking him before the doctor could even arrive. The midwife had whispered about a curse. The doctor had spoken of weak constitutions and bad luck. But the town had decided it was Clara herself who brought death to her babies. Some said she had gypsy blood. Others claimed she had scorned a beggar woman who had placed a hex on her womb. A few of the more religious folks said it was punishment for some unnamed sin, that God had turned his face from her. Clara had stopped trying to defend herself after Samuel died. What could she say? Her babies had died. That was the truth no one could argue with. Whether it was curse or chance, the result was the same. 3 small graves and a mother with empty arms and a heart that felt like shattered glass in her chest. She forced herself to stand and unpack her few belongings. A change of clothes, both black. Her mother's Bible, though she had not opened it since Samuel's death. A tintype of her wedding day when she had been 19 and foolish enough to believe in happy endings. A small wooden box that contained locks of hair from each of her babies, tied with ribbon. She placed this on the washstand where she could see it, a reminder of why she was here. To start over. To leave the curse behind if such a thing was possible. That evening she joined Mrs. Hoffman and the 2 other boarders for supper. They were both seamstresses who worked at the dressmaker's shop on Main Street, and they chattered about the upcoming harvest dance and which cowboys might attend. They were polite to Clara but curious, their eyes full of questions they were too well-mannered to ask directly. "What brings you to Redemption, Mrs. Whitmore?" The younger one finally ventured, a girl named Betsy who could not have been more than 18. "I am widowed," Clara said simply. "I came west to find new opportunities." "Oh, how sad," Betsy said, her face crumpling with sympathy. "Was it recent?" "6 months ago." "And no children?" the other seamstress, Louise, asked. Clara's throat tightened. "No, no children." It was not precisely a lie, she had no living children. But the omission felt like a betrayal of Thomas, Mary, and Samuel, as if she were erasing them from existence. She pushed food around her plate, unable to swallow past the lump in her throat. After supper, she excused herself and returned to her room. Through the thin walls, she could hear the murmur of conversation, the sound of someone playing a fiddle in the saloon down the street, the clop of horse hooves on the packed dirt road. Normal sounds. Life continuing as it always did, indifferent to her grief. She was rising from bed at dawn when she heard it. A baby crying. The sound pierced through her sleep like a knife, and she was on her feet before she was fully awake, her heart pounding. It took her several moments to realize the sound was coming from outside, from somewhere in the alley below her window. Clara pressed her face to the glass, searching the gray pre-dawn light. There, near the back steps of the boarding house, she saw a basket. And in that basket, wrapped in a stained blanket, was an infant. She did not remember rushing down the stairs, did not remember pulling open the back door. But suddenly she was kneeling in the dirt, lifting the baby into her arms, and the crying stopped. The child was tiny, perhaps only a few days old, with a red, wrinkled face and a surprisingly strong grip. A girl, she realized, checking quickly. Someone had left a baby girl on the doorstep like an unwanted package. "What on earth?" Mrs. Hoffman's voice came from behind her. The older woman stood in her nightgown and wrapper, her hair in a long gray braid, staring at Clara and the baby with wide eyes. "I heard her crying," Clara said. "Someone left her here." Mrs. Hoffman came down the steps and peered into the basket. There was a scrap of paper pinned to the blanket. She unpinned it and held it up to the growing light. "It says please take care of her. I cannot, no signature, no name for the child." "Who would do such a thing?" Clara whispered, holding the baby closer. The infant had settled against her chest, making small, snuffling sounds. "A desperate woman," Mrs. Hoffman said grimly. "Or a scared one. Happens more often than you would think, especially in a town like this where there are saloon girls and not much in the way of choices for women in trouble. We will need to take her to the marshal. He will know what to do." But Clara's arms had already tightened around the small, warm body, and something fierce and protective rose up in her chest. "She needs to be fed and changed. She is wet through." Mrs. Hoffman's expression softened. "You are right. Come inside. We will get her settled, and then we will figure out what is to be done." They brought the baby into the kitchen, and Mrs. Hoffman mixed up some sugar water to tide the infant over until they could find a nursing mother or get some goat's milk. Clara changed her using a clean dish towel as a makeshift diaper, her hands remembering the movements even though it had been a year since Samuel died. The baby girl was thin but appeared healthy, her lungs certainly strong based on the volume of her earlier cries. "You are good with her, Mrs." Hoffman observed, watching as Clara coaxed the baby to take some of the sugar water from a clean rag. "I had some experience," Clara said quietly. "With your own," Clara hesitated, then nodded. There seemed no point in lying now. 3, they all died as infants, fever took them. She waited for Mrs. Hoffman to recoil, to make the sign against evil, to ask her to leave. But the older woman only sighed deeply and reached out to touch the baby's downy head with gentle fingers. "I lost 2 myself," she said softly. "Long ago, before I came to Texas. Diphtheria. My husband never recovered from it. That is why I run a boarding house instead of having a home full of children and grandchildren. Life does not always go the way we plan, does it?" Clara felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected kindness, the shared grief that needed no explanation or justification. "No, it does not." "Well, this little one needs more than sugar water. I will send word to Maria Alvarez. She has a baby of her own still nursing, and she might be willing to feed this little scrap as well. In the meantime, you hold her. She seems content with you." The morning passed in a blur of activity. Maria Alvarez, a young Mexican woman with kind eyes and ample milk, came to nurse the abandoned baby. The marshal was summoned, a weathered man in his 50s who took notes and said he would ask around town to see if anyone knew of a woman who had been pregnant and suddenly was not. A collection was taken up at the general store to buy supplies for the baby, and before noon, Clara found herself in possession of several yards of flannel for proper diapers, a few tiny gowns, and a bottle with a rubber nipple for when Maria could not be there. What will happen to her? Clara asked the marshal as he prepared to leave. If no one claims her, she will need to be placed with a family, he said. Or sent to an orphanage in Austin if we cannot find anyone local to take her in. "I will take her," Clara heard herself say. The words came out before she had consciously decided to speak them, but once they were in the air, she knew they were right. This was why she had come to redemption, not to escape the curse, but to face it head-on. To prove that she could be a mother, that she was not the harbinger of death the people in Missouri had named her, the marshal looked surprised. "You are a widow, Mrs. Whitmore, and new to town. Do you have the means to support a child? I will find work. I will manage, please." "She needs a mother, and I need her." He exchanged a long look with Mrs. Hoffman, who had been listening from the doorway. The older woman gave a slight nod. "Let us give it a week," the marshal said finally. "See if anyone comes forward to claim her. If not, and if you can prove you have employment and can provide for her, I will see about making arrangements for you to keep her legal and proper." Clara agreed, though she already knew in her bones that no one would come for this baby. The child had been abandoned with intention, left on a doorstep in the hope that someone kind would find her. And Clara would be that someone. She would protect this little girl with everything she had. She named her Hope. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Clara woke with the dawn to feed Hope the goat's milk Mrs. Hoffman had procured, changed her, walked her around the room when she fussed, and marveled at every tiny sound and movement. Maria came by twice a day to nurse, refusing to take payment, but accepting the food that Clara insisted on providing. The other boarders cooed over the baby, and Mrs. Hoffman proved surprisingly helpful, offering advice and even taking Hope for an hour here and there so Clara could rest. But Clara also knew she needed to find work, and quickly. On the 3rd day after finding Hope, she dressed in her best black dress, arranged her hair as neatly as she could, and set out to inquire at the shops along Main Street. The dressmaker had no openings. The general store already had enough help. The restaurant was not hiring. The laundry might have something in a few weeks, but could not promise anything now. By mid-afternoon, Clara's hope was flagging, and her feet hurt from walking up and down the boardwalks in her worn boots. She was standing in front of the Lucky Dollar Saloon, wondering if she dared inquire within despite knowing what kind of work was typically offered to women in such establishments, when a voice behind her made her turn. "You look lost." The man was tall, lean, and weathered by sun and wind in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors. He wore dusty denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. A gun belt sat low on his hips, the holster worn smooth with use. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were blue as a summer sky and held a directness that was neither aggressive nor presumptuous, just honest and clear. "I am looking for work," Clara said, lifting her chin. "Though I do not think I will find what I seek in there." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Probably not if you are looking for respectable employment, though Sally who runs the place is a decent woman, all things considered. You new to town?" "I arrived less than a week ago. My name is Clara Whitmore." "Garrett Stone," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I run a horse ranch about 5 miles north of here. Not much to look at yet, but I am building it up. You have experience with anything besides shop work?" Clara thought of the farm she had lived on with her husband, the endless chores that had filled her days. "I can cook and clean. I know how to tend a garden and preserve food. I can sew and mend. I have some experience with chickens and goats." "Can you keep books, records, and such?" she nodded. "My father was a schoolteacher. He made sure I had a good education. I can read, write, and cipher." Garrett's eyes brightened with interest. "I could use someone to help organize my records. I am better with horses than paperwork, and the whole thing has gotten away from me. I can also always use help with cooking and general work around the place. It would not be easy. The ranch is rough living yet, and I do not have much in the way of amenities. But I can pay fair wages and provide room and board if you need it." Clara's heart leaped, but then reality crashed back down. "I have a baby. An infant. I found her abandoned and I am caring for her. I cannot take a position that would require me to leave her." She waited for him to withdraw the offer to make excuses. What ranch owner wanted a woman with a baby underfoot? But Garrett just tilted his head, considering. "Bring her along," he said. "I am not running a fancy operation here. If you can manage your work and care for the child, I do not see why it should be a problem." "How old is she?" "Only about a week, I think, maybe less." Clara felt she had to be honest, had to give him a chance to reconsider. "And you should know, Mr. Stone, that I was married before. I had 3 children. They all died as infants. Some people believe I am cursed." "I do not know if that is true or not, but I thought you should know before you decide anything." She held her breath, watching his face for the inevitable withdrawal, the superstitious fear, the polite refusal. But Garrett's expression did not change except for a slight softening around his eyes. "I am sorry for your losses," he said quietly. "That is a heavy weight for anyone to carry, but I do not put much stock in curses, Mrs. Whitmore. I believe in hard work, fair dealing, and giving people a chance. If you want the job, it is yours. You can start as soon as you are ready." Clara felt something crack open in her chest, a small ray of light penetrating the darkness she had carried for so long. "Thank you," she whispered. "You do not know what this means to me." "I have some idea," he said. "Everyone who comes west is running from something or looking for something. Sometimes both. When can you start?" "I need to speak with Mrs. Hoffman about keeping my room for a few days a week in case I need to come to town, and I need to make arrangements for feeding Hope, but I could begin the day after tomorrow if that suits you." "That suits me fine." "I will come by Mrs. Hoffman's place at sunup with the wagon. Bring what you need for you and the baby. There is a cabin on the property that is not much, but it is dry and sound. You can have that for your quarters." They shook hands, his grip firm and warm, and Clara felt the first stirring of something that might have been hope if she dared to name it. She returned to the boarding house with a lighter step, cradling her news like a precious thing. Mrs. Hoffman was pleased and only a little worried. "Garrett Stone is a good man," she said. "Lost his wife in childbirth 2 years ago along with the baby. Came out here from Colorado to start over, same as you. He keeps to himself mostly, but folks who have dealt with him say he is honest and hardworking. You could do worse for an employer." Clara's heart ached at the knowledge of Garrett's loss, understanding now the shadow she had glimpsed in his eyes. He knew grief. He understood it. Perhaps that was why he had not flinched from her confession about the curse. She spent the next day preparing. Maria agreed to provide several bottles of breast milk that could be kept cool in the springhouse Garrett apparently had, and she promised to come out to the ranch every few days to nurse Hope directly. Clara packed her few belongings, made sure she had enough diapers and gowns for the baby, and tried not to let her anxiety overwhelm her excitement. What if she failed? What if she could not do the work? What if Hope became ill out there, far from town and the doctor? What if the curse followed her after all, but she pushed those thoughts away? She had been given a chance and she would take it. She would not live her life in fear of what might happen. She had already survived the worst. Whatever came next, she would face it. Garrett arrived precisely at sunup, driving a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 good horses. He helped Clara load her trunk and carpet bag, then carefully took Hope from her arms so Clara could climb up onto the seat. He handed the baby back with surprising gentleness for such a rough-looking man, and Clara found herself noticing the way his large hands cradled Hope's tiny body with instinctive care. The ride to the ranch took about an hour over rough roads that were little more than wagon tracks through the prairie. The land here was rolling grassland dotted with mesquite and oak, stretching away to distant blue hills. Cattle grazed in the distance, red and white specks against the golden grass. The sky was immense, unmarred by clouds, and the air smelled of dust and growing things and wildness. "It is beautiful," Clara said softly, meaning it. "It is that," Garrett agreed. "Hard country, but fair if you treat it right. I have about 200 head of cattle now, and I am building up my horse stock. Got a good stallion and 6 mares. Hoping to make a name for myself breeding working horses. Cowboys always need good mounts." He pointed out landmarks as they traveled. A creek that ran year-round and provided water for the stock. A stand of cottonwoods that offered shade in summer. The boundary markers of his property, which he said covered nearly 500 acres. "Most of it is leased from the state," he explained. "But I own the core parcel where the buildings are, enough to make a real go of it if I can get through these next few years." The ranch house came into view as they topped a small rise. It was a low, sprawling structure built of weathered wood with a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Nearby stood a barn, a corral, a chicken coop, and a small cabin that Clara assumed was to be hers. Beyond that, she could see the outline of what might have been a bunkhouse, though it looked incomplete. "Not much to look at yet," Garrett said, echoing his earlier words, "but it is home." He helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk into the cabin while Clara held Hope. The interior was simple but clean. 1 room with a fireplace, a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, a shelf for belongings, and a small window that let in the morning light. Someone, probably Garrett, had made an effort to sweep out the dust and hang a curtain at the window. "It is perfect," Clara said honestly. After the cramped boarding house room, this felt like a palace. She had her own space, her own door, privacy for her and Hope. "Glad you think so." The springhouse is out back. Stays cool even in summer. There is an outhouse about 50 yards that way, and water can be drawn from the well near the main house. You will take your meals in the kitchen there. I will show you around, and then we can talk about what needs doing. He was as good as his word. The main house was masculine and spare, with furniture that was sturdy but unadorned. The kitchen was the largest room with a good stove, a big table, and shelves stocked with basic supplies. Garrett's bedroom was off to one side, and there were 2 other small rooms that he said he had originally planned for children but now mostly used for storage. "The paperwork is in here," he said, opening the door to one of those rooms. Clara's eyes widened. There were stacks of papers on every surface. Receipts, bills of sale, correspondence, ledgers with half-finished entries, loose pages covered in calculations. "I can see why you need help," she said, unable to keep the amusement from her voice. Garrett had the grace to look embarrassed. "Like I said, better with horses than record-keeping. I know it is a mess. If you can make sense of it, I will be grateful." "I can make sense of it," Clara assured him. "It will take some time, but I can organize all of this and set up a proper system for you." That is what I was hoping to hear. "For today, though, why do you not just settle in?" Get yourself and the baby comfortable. Tomorrow will be soon enough to start work. Clara appreciated his consideration, but she was eager to prove herself. If you do not mind, I would like to start cooking at least. You will need dinner, and I might as well begin as I mean to go on. Garrett looked pleased. I will not argue with that. I have been living on beans and hardtack for too long. If you can make anything more interesting than that, I will count myself lucky. He showed her where he kept his stores. Flour, cornmeal, beans, rice, coffee, sugar, salt, and dried beef. There was a root cellar with potatoes and onions. The chickens provided eggs. He had a smokehouse with bacon and ham. It was basic, but Clara had worked with less. I will ride out to check on the herd, Garrett said. I will be back by supper time. You need anything, there is a bell on the porch. Ring it if there is trouble, and I will come running. Otherwise, make yourself at home. After he left, Clara stood in the kitchen holding hope and looking around at what was to be her new workplace, her new life. It was so quiet here, so far from town and people and their whispers. Just the wind in the grass, the cluck of chickens, the distant low of cattle. Peace, if she could learn to accept it. She settled Hope in a dresser drawer padded with blankets, the makeshift cradle she had been using at the boarding house. The baby was content, full of milk and drowsing in the warm kitchen. Clara set to work. She found yeast and set a batch of bread to rise. She soaked beans for tomorrow. She made a simple stew with the salt pork, potatoes, and onions, seasoning it with wild herbs she found growing near the spring house. She cleaned the kitchen as she worked, scrubbing surfaces and organizing supplies, beginning the process of making this space her own. The work felt good, purposeful. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara felt useful. Not cursed. Not pitied. Just a woman doing honest work, caring for a child, building something that might last. Garrett returned as the sun was lowering toward the horizon, dusty and tired. He washed up at the pump outside, then came into the kitchen and stopped short, staring at the table she had set with actual plates and utensils, instead of eating straight from the pot as he apparently had been doing. It smells like heaven in here, he said. It is just stew and bread, Clara said, suddenly shy. Nothing fancy. It is the best thing I have smelled in 2 years, he said firmly. Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. Clara, she said impulsively. If we are to work together, you should call me Clara. Clara, he repeated and smiled. And you can call me Garrett. No need for formality out here. They ate together at the table, and Clara was surprised by how comfortable it felt. Garrett was not much of a talker, but his silences were easy, not oppressive. He complimented her cooking repeatedly, asked after Hope, and told her a bit about his day checking fence lines and moving cattle to better grazing. You have a hired hand? Clara asked. Not full-time. There is a young man, Charlie Briggs, who comes out from town a few days a week to help with heavy work. And during roundup and branding, I hire on a few extra cowboys, but mostly it is just me. Cannot afford more yet. You have built something impressive for one man, Clara said, looking around at the solid house, the well-maintained outbuildings visible through the window. I had to, Garrett said quietly. After Margaret died after the baby, I could not stay in Colorado. Everywhere I looked, I saw what I had lost, so I came here and I worked. Dawn to dark, 7 days a week, working until I was too tired to think, too tired to remember. The ranch saved my life, I think, gave me a reason to keep going. Clara understood that better than he could know. How long were you married? 3 years. We were happy. She wanted children so badly, was so excited when she finally conceived, but the birth went wrong. Baby was turned around, and by the time the doctor realized, it was too late for either of them. Boy, we were going to name him Thomas. Clara's breath caught. My first was Thomas. Their eyes met across the table, and in that moment, Clara felt a connection forged between them, built on shared grief and understood loss. They were both survivors, both broken in ways that could not be mended, only endured. I am sorry, she said softly, for your wife, for your son, for the life you should have had. I am sorry for yours as well, Garrett said, and I hope you find some peace here, Clara. God knows we both deserve a little peace. That night, lying in her narrow bed in the cabin with Hope sleeping peacefully in her drawer cradle, Clara thought about Garrett's words, peace. Could she find it here? Could she build a life in this wild, open place where the wind sang in the grass and the stars blazed overhead like scattered diamonds? She thought she might. If the curse did not follow her, if Hope stayed healthy and strong. If she could prove to herself and to the world that she was not a bringer of death but a giver of life. She whispered a prayer into the darkness, the first real prayer she had spoken since Samuel died. Please, let me keep her. Let me have this one chance to be a mother. Let the curse be broken. The days turned into weeks, and a routine established itself. Clara rose with the dawn to feed Hope, then went to the main house to cook breakfast for Garrett and herself. After breakfast, Garrett would ride out to work with the cattle or horses, and Clara would spend her mornings tackling the disaster of paperwork in the storage room. She organized receipts by date, recorded transactions in ledgers, calculated profits and losses, and created a filing system that would be easy to maintain going forward. In the afternoons, she would prepare dinner, tend the garden she had started near the spring house, collect eggs from the chickens, and do whatever mending or cleaning needed doing. She discovered that Garrett had almost no clothing that was not worn through or missing buttons, so she spent her evenings sewing by lamplight, patching and mending and taking satisfaction in making his life a little easier. Hope thrived. Maria came out from town twice a week to nurse her, and in between, the baby took goat's milk from a bottle without complaint. She was growing, filling out, her eyes bright and alert, her grip strong when she wrapped her tiny fingers around Clara's thumb. Every day that passed without fever, without sickness, without the shadow of death creeping close, was a victory Clara treasured. And every day she found herself noticing Garrett more. The way he was unfailingly gentle with Hope, stopping in from his work to check on her, letting her grip his finger while he made funny faces that were both ridiculous and endearing. The way he always thanked Clara for meals, for clean clothes, for the organized paperwork that allowed him to actually understand his own finances for the first time in years. The way he never pried into her past, never asked questions that might hurt, but listened when she chose to share. One evening about a month after she had arrived, Garrett came in from his work to find Clara rocking Hope in the kitchen, tears streaming silently down her face. He was at her side in an instant, his hand on her shoulder. "What is wrong? Is the baby sick?" "No," Clara managed to say. "She is fine." "She is perfect. That is why I am crying." Garrett pulled out a chair and sat down next to her, his blue eyes full of concern. "I do not understand." "She is 6 weeks old," Clara said, the words tumbling out. "Thomas died at 5 days, Mary at 7, Samuel at 3. But Hope, she is 6 weeks old and she is healthy and strong and growing. Maybe the curse is broken. Maybe I can actually keep her." "There was never any curse," Garrett said firmly. "Just terrible bad luck and the hard reality that babies die sometimes. It is not fair and it is not right, but it does not mean you are cursed, Clara." "How can you be sure?" she whispered. "What if something happens to her? What if I lose her too?" Garrett reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumb, the gesture so tender it made her heart ache. "You cannot live your life waiting for disaster. Hope is healthy. You are taking good care of her. And if something did happen, God forbid, it would not be because of anything you did or did not do, it would just be the way of things sometimes." "I could not survive losing another child," Clara said. "It would destroy me." "You are stronger than you think," Garrett said. "You have already survived what would break most people, but I do not think you are going to lose hope. I think that little girl is going to grow up strong and fierce, just like her mother." Clara looked at him through her tears, seeing the sincerity in his face, the belief he had in her when she struggled to believe in herself. "Thank you," she said softly, "for giving us this chance, for not turning us away when you learned about my past." "Thank you," he countered, "for bringing light back into this house. I did not realize how dark it had gotten until you arrived." There was a moment when their eyes held, when Clara felt the air between them shift and thicken with possibility. But then Hope made a small sound, breaking the spell, and Garrett stood up, clearing his throat. "I should wash up for supper," he said. "Yes," Clara agreed, grateful for the escape from the intensity of the moment. She was not ready for whatever was building between them, not yet, maybe not ever. She had loved once, and it had ended in tragedy and despair. She did not know if she had the courage to risk her heart again, but over the following weeks, it became harder to deny what was growing between them. There were small moments that accumulated like drops of water filling a well. The brush of hands when passing dishes at the table. The way Garrett started bringing wildflowers into the house, saying they made the place cheerful but leaving them where Clara would see them first thing in the morning. The evening when a summer storm rolled in and Clara was frightened by the thunder, and Garrett sat with her and Hope in the cabin, telling stories until the storm passed. Charlie Briggs, the young hired hand, noticed and teased Garrett mercilessly when he thought Clara could not hear. "When are you going to court that woman proper?" he asked one day while they were working in the corral. "It is clear as day you are sweet on her." "Mind your business, Charlie," Garrett said, but his ears had turned red. "I am just saying life is short. You know that better than most. If you have been given a second chance at happiness, seems foolish not to take it." Garrett did not answer, but Charlie's words stayed with him. He had not been looking for love, had not thought himself capable of it anymore after Margaret. But Clara had awakened something in him, some hope he had thought permanently extinguished. She understood his grief because she carried her own. She did not expect him to be anything other than what he was. And when she smiled, truly smiled, it was like the sun breaking through clouds. But he also knew she was fragile in ways that were not obvious. She still sometimes woke from nightmares, he could tell from the shadows under her eyes. She still flinched when Hope coughed or sneezed. She still wore only black, as if she could not allow herself to step out of mourning. He did not want to push her, did not want to add to her burdens, so he tried to be patient, to show her through actions rather than words that he cared for her, that she was valued and cherished. He fixed the steps to her cabin without being asked. He brought her a rocking chair he had ordered from town, saying every mother needed one. He paid her wages promptly and always thanked her for her work, making sure she knew she was appreciated, and slowly, gradually, Clara began to heal. Hope's continued good health gave her confidence. The peace of the ranch, the honest work, the lack of whispers and judgment, all of it allowed her to breathe more easily. She found herself laughing at Garrett's dry humor. Found herself looking forward to their shared meals, to the conversations that ranged from practical matters to deeper questions about life and faith, and what it meant to start over. One Sunday morning in late fall, nearly 4 months after she had arrived, Garrett asked if she would like to accompany him into town for church services. Clara had been avoiding town, afraid of what people might say when they learned about her past, but she knew she could not hide forever. "I would like that," she said. "Hope should be baptized soon anyway. It has been weighing on my mind." They dressed in their Sunday best, or what passed for it. Clara wore her black dress, now carefully mended and pressed. Garrett wore clean trousers and a white shirt that Clara had made for him, having noticed he had nothing suitable for town. Hope was dressed in a tiny gown that Mrs. Hoffman had sent out with Maria, white cotton with delicate embroidery at the neck. The service was held in the small white church Clara had noticed her first day in town. The congregation was larger than she had expected, ranchers and townsfolk filling the pews. Heads turned when Garrett walked in with Clara at his side, and she heard the whispers begin immediately. "That is the woman who took in the foundling. She is working out at Garrett Stone's place. I heard she is a widow from back east. Mighty convenient, her showing up just in time to find that baby." Clara kept her chin up and her eyes forward, refusing to let the whispers touch her. Garrett placed a hand at the small of her back, a gesture of support and solidarity, and guided her to a pew near the front. The preacher was a thin man with kind eyes who spoke of redemption and second chances, of how God's grace was sufficient for all sins, all sorrows. Clara found herself actually listening, actually letting the words sink in instead of bouncing off the armor of grief and anger she had worn for so long. After the service, the preacher approached them. "Mr. Stone, good to see you. It has been a while." "Reverend Hart," Garrett said, shaking his hand. "I would like you to meet Mrs. Clara Whitmore. She is working at my ranch and caring for the foundling child." "Ah, yes, I heard about the baby," the Reverend said warmly. "A blessed thing that you were there to take her in." "And I understand you wish to have her baptized." "Yes," Clara said. "If that would be possible, of course. We can perform the baptism next Sunday if you would like. Have you chosen godparents?" Clara glanced at Garrett, uncertain. She had not thought that far ahead. Garrett cleared his throat. "I would be honored to stand as godfather if Clara is agreeable." "Yes," Clara said quickly. "That would be perfect, and perhaps Mrs. Hoffman would agree to be godmother." "I am certain she would be delighted," Garrett said. They made the arrangements, and then Mrs. Hoffman herself bustled over, exclaiming over how much Hope had grown and insisting they come to the boarding house for Sunday dinner. Clara tried to demur, not wanting to impose, but Mrs. Hoffman would not hear of it. Over pot roast and potatoes, Mrs. Hoffman regaled them with town gossip. A new family had moved in and opened a bakery. The marshal's son was getting married. There had been some trouble with cattle rustlers to the south, but nothing in their area yet, and everyone was talking about the upcoming harvest dance in 2 weeks. "You should come, Mrs. Hoffman said, looking pointedly at Garrett. "Both of you, it would be good for folks to see you are part of the community." "I do not dance," Clara said quickly. "Nonsense. Everyone dances at the harvest dance. It is tradition." "I have no proper dress for dancing, only mourning clothes." Mrs. Hoffman waved that away. "We can fix that. I have been thinking for a while now that it is time for you to put aside full mourning, dear. It has been over a year since your husband passed, has it not?" Clara nodded slowly. "It had been 13 months, in fact." "Then half mourning would be appropriate. Gray or lavender. I have fabric that would be perfect, and the seamstresses at the shop can whip up a simple dress in no time. Consider it my gift to you and Hope. You have done so much for that child and for Garrett. Let me do this." Clara felt tears threaten again. The kindness of these people who knew nothing of her past, who accepted her without judgment, was almost more than she could bear. "You are very generous," she managed to say. "I am a practical woman," Mrs. Hoffman corrected. "And I can see clear as day that you and Garrett are good for each other. Everyone deserves a second chance at happiness. Now, let us talk about this dress." The following Sunday, Hope was baptized in a simple, moving ceremony. She cried lustily when the Reverend poured water over her head, causing the congregation to laugh affectionately. Clara held her afterward, whispering promises into her downy hair. Promises to protect her, to raise her right, to love her with everything she had. Garrett stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, and she knew without words that he was making promises too. They were becoming a family, the three of them, bound together by loss and hope and the tentative beginnings of love. The harvest dance was held in the town square, with lanterns strung between the buildings and a raised platform for the musicians. There was a long table laden with food that the women of the town had prepared, and barrels of cider and lemonade. Children ran between the adults, playing games and shrieking with laughter. Cowboys stood in groups, assessing the available young ladies and working up the courage to ask for dances. Clara wore her new dress, a soft gray with lavender trim that Mrs. Hoffman had insisted brought out her eyes. She had left off her mourning bonnet for the first time in over a year, and her dark hair was pinned up in a simple but becoming style. She felt exposed without her black armor, but also lighter, as if she were finally allowing herself to step back into life. Hope was being doted on by a group of women who had gathered specifically to coo over the baby. Clara had been nervous about leaving her, but Mrs. Hoffman had assured her the child would be perfectly safe and well cared for. "You need some time to yourself," the older woman had said firmly. Go dance with that cowboy of yours and remember what it is to be young." "He is not my cowboy," Clara had protested, but Mrs. Hoffman had just smiled knowingly. Now, standing at the edge of the dance floor watching couples whirl past to a lively reel, Clara felt Garrett appear at her side. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." He did. He had gotten a haircut and was wearing new trousers and a vest over his white shirt. Without his hat and dusty work clothes, he looked younger, less weathered, and Clara found herself noticing the strong line of his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders. "Dance with me," Garrett said, holding out his hand. "I am not a very good dancer," Clara warned, but she placed her hand in his. "Neither am I. We will muddle through together." He led her onto the floor just as the musicians started a waltz, a slower piece that Clara felt more confident about. Garrett's hand settled at her waist, and she placed hers on his shoulder, and then they were moving, swept up in the music and the moment. Clara had not danced since her wedding. Had not been held by a man, had not felt the warmth of a body close to hers, the strength of arms guiding her through the steps. It felt strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. "You are doing fine," Garrett murmured, and she realized she had been holding her breath. "Sorry," she said, exhaling. "I am just nervous." "Why?" "Because everyone is watching. Because I have not done this in so long. Because," she hesitated, then decided to be honest, "because it feels like I am betraying my husband's memory." Garrett's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Do you think he would want you to be alone forever? To never dance, never smile, never live?" "I do not know," Clara admitted. "We did not have that kind of marriage, honestly. It was arranged by our families. We were fond of each other, but I cannot say we were in love. Not the way people talk about in stories. But you grieved him." "I grieved what we lost, the children, the life we were trying to build, the future that got taken away, but I do not think I grieved him, not really. Does that make me heartless?" "It makes you honest," Garrett said. "And it means you have nothing to feel guilty about if you choose to move forward with your life." They danced in silence for a moment, and then Garrett spoke again, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I need to tell you something, Clara. I need to be honest with you before this goes any further." Her heart began to pound. "All right. I have feelings for you, strong feelings. I tried to fight them, told myself it was too soon, that you were not ready, that I had no business even thinking about courting again. But the truth is, you have become the best part of my day. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I think about you when I am out working. I love the way you are with Hope, the way you have brought warmth back into my house, the way you smile when you think no one is watching. And I need to know if there is any chance at all, that you might feel the same way." Clara stumbled slightly, and Garrett steadied her, his eyes searching her face. She could feel her pulse racing, her breath coming shallow. This was the moment, the choice. She could protect her heart, keep her walls up, stay safe in her grief, or she could take a chance. Risk being hurt again, risk loving again. "I am scared," she whispered. "So am I," Garrett said. "I am terrified. After Margaret, I never thought I would want to open my heart to someone again. But you make me want to try, you make me hope. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose you or you lose me? What if Hope gets sick? What if the curse is real and I bring death to everyone I love? Then we will face it together," Garrett said firmly. "Whatever comes, we will face it together. That is what people who care about each other do. They do not run from fear. They stand beside each other and fight." Clara felt tears spill over, but this time they were not tears of grief. They were tears of release, of hope, of the terrifying and wonderful possibility of letting herself love again. "I care about you," she said, her voice breaking. "More than I thought I could care about anyone again, but I do not know if I am ready to trust it yet, to believe it can last." "That is all right," Garrett said gently. "I am not asking you to make any promises. I am just asking you to give us a chance, to let me court you properly, to see where this might go." Clara looked up into his blue eyes and saw nothing but sincerity, patience, and a hope that matched her own. She took a shaky breath and nodded. "All right," she said. "We can try together." Garrett's smile was like sunrise, bright and full of promise. He pulled her slightly closer as they danced, and Clara allowed herself to relax into his embrace to feel safe and protected and cherished. The music swirled around them, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara felt something other than grief and fear. She felt alive. The next few months were a time of careful, tentative courtship. Garrett continued to respect Clara's need for space and time, never pushing, always patient. But he also made his intentions clear. He brought her small gifts, a pretty comb for her hair, a book of poetry from the general store, a shawl to ward off the autumn chill. He insisted on accompanying her to town for church every Sunday, and afterward they would walk together, talking about everything and nothing while Hope slept in Clara's arms. He told her about his childhood in Colorado, about learning to work with horses from his father, about the dreams he had of building the best horse ranch in Texas. She told him about her life before, about her schoolteacher father and her quiet, pious mother, about the pressures she had felt to marry young and produce children, about the slow death of hope with each tiny grave she had dug. "They say I'm cursed because my babies died," she said one evening as they sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. Hope was asleep in the cradle Garrett had built, beautifully crafted with rockers that moved smooth and silent. "And what do you say?" Garrett asked. Clara thought about it. 6 months ago, she would have believed the curse was real, would have accepted it as her burden to bear. But now, with Hope thriving and healthy at 4 months old, with Garrett's steady presence and affection, with the peace she had found in this wild, open place, she was not so sure. "I say that I was unlucky," she said slowly. "I say that I loved 3 babies who died, and that broke something in me. But I do not think I am cursed. I think I was hurt and afraid and convinced by other people that there was something wrong with me. But Hope is proving them wrong. Every day she grows stronger is proof that there is no curse, just bad luck that has finally turned." Garrett reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I am glad you are starting to believe that. It is because of you," Clara said. "You gave me a chance when no one else would. You never looked at me with fear or suspicion. You just saw me, a person, a woman, not a curse or a cautionary tale." "I saw someone who was hurting and trying to be brave," Garrett said. "I saw someone who deserved kindness and a fresh start." "Same as me." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. Clara felt Garrett's thumb rubbing gentle circles on the back of her hand, and she allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to have this always, to share her evenings with this man. To build a life together. To maybe, someday, have children who lived and grew. The thought should have terrified her, but instead it filled her with a tentative, fragile joy. Winter came to the Texas prairie with cold winds and occasional freezes, though nothing like the harsh winters Clara remembered from Missouri. The work on the ranch changed with the seasons. Cattle had to be moved to winter pasture. Repairs had to be made to buildings before the worst weather hit. Hay had to be stored and rationed out. Clara continued her work keeping Garrett's books, and she took satisfaction in seeing the ranch's finances become more organized and profitable. She also took over more of the household management, making sure they had adequate supplies for winter, preserving vegetables from her garden, smoking meat, and generally ensuring they would be comfortable during the lean months. Hope continued to grow and thrive. She was 6 months old now, sitting up on her own, reaching for everything within grasp and beginning to babble in a way that suggested words might not be far behind. She was a happy baby, quick to smile and laugh, and she clearly adored both Clara and Garrett. One cold December evening, Garrett asked Clara to take a walk with him. She bundled Hope into a warm blanket and they strolled around the ranch, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. "I have something I want to ask you," Garrett said, his breath misting in the cold air. Clara's heart began to pound. She had been expecting this, hoping for it, fearing it, all at the same time. "I know we have only known each other for 6 months," he continued, And I know you have been through more than anyone should have to bear, but Clara, you have become essential to me. To my life, to my heart, to my home. I cannot imagine going forward without you, and I hope that maybe you feel the same way." He stopped walking and turned to face her, pulling a small box from his pocket. Even in the dim starlight, Clara could see his hands were shaking. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "Will you let me be a husband to you and a father to Hope? Will you build a life with me here on this ranch and trust that whatever comes, we will face it together?" Clara looked down at Hope, who was staring up at the stars with wide, wondering eyes. Then she looked back at Garrett, at this good, patient, kind man who had given her a second chance, who had shown her that love did not have to end in tragedy, who made her believe in possibilities again. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, I will marry you." Garrett let out a breath she had not realized he was holding and opened the box to reveal a simple gold band. "It was my grandmother's," he said. "The only thing I have left from my family in Colorado. I would be honored if you would wear it." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Then he pulled her close, careful not to crush Hope between them, and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and Clara felt something in her chest unlock, some final barrier falling away. She was allowed to love again. Allowed to hope, allowed to believe in happy endings. They were married in the little white church 3 weeks later, on a clear January morning in 1879. Mrs. Hoffman stood up with Clara, and Charlie Briggs stood up with Garrett. Half the town turned out for the ceremony, and if there were those who whispered about the speed of the courtship or wondered if it was wise for two people marked by tragedy to tie their fates together, Clara did not hear them. She heard only the Reverend's voice speaking of love and commitment and second chances. She felt only the warmth of Garrett's hand holding hers as they spoke their vows. She saw only the tears of joy in Mrs. Hoffman's eyes, and the way Hope, held by Maria Alvarez in the front pew, seemed to smile at just the right moment. The wedding breakfast was held at the boarding house, and there was music and laughter and genuine happiness. People came up to congratulate them, to welcome Clara fully into the community, to tell Garrett how fortunate he was. "You did good, son," one old rancher said, clapping Garrett on the shoulder. "She is a fine woman, and that baby is lucky to have you both." As the celebration wound down and they prepared to return to the ranch, Clara felt Mrs. Hoffman pull her aside. "I am so proud of you, dear," the older woman said, her eyes suspiciously bright. "When you arrived here last summer, you were so broken, so lost, and look at you now, married, a mother. Starting fresh, you deserve every bit of happiness." "I could not have done it without you," Clara said, hugging her fiercely. "You gave me a place to stay, you helped with Hope, you encouraged me to take the job with Garrett, you believed in me when I could not believe in myself." "That is what we do for each other," Mrs. Hoffman said. "We women have to look out for one another. Now go home with your husband and your daughter and build the life you were meant to have." The words struck Clara with force. Home, husband, daughter, not widow, not cursed woman. Not grief-stricken mother who had lost everything, but wife, mother, woman with a future. They rode back to the ranch in the wagon with Hope asleep between them. The sun was setting, painting the prairie in shades of gold and rose. Garrett glanced over at Clara and smiled. "Happy?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "But yes, happy. Good, because I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." That night, in the bedroom of the main house that was now theirs to share, Garrett held Clara with a tenderness that made her weep. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies and hearts with equal care. And afterward, lying in his arms listening to his steady heartbeat, Clara felt peace settle over her like a blanket. The curse was broken. Not because of magic or prayer or sheer force of will, but because she had chosen to believe it could be broken. Because she had let herself love again, trust again, hope again. Because she had found a man who understood her grief and did not fear it, who saw her strength even when she felt weak, who loved her not despite her past, but including all of it. The following months and years unfolded with the kind of quiet joy that Clara had never imagined possible. Hope grew into a toddler, then a little girl, bright and curious and full of energy. She learned to walk, to talk, to ride a gentle mare that Garrett trained specifically for her. She called Clara Mama and Garrett Papa, and neither of them ever corrected her or explained that they were not her birth parents. She was theirs in every way that mattered. The ranch prospered under their joint care. Clara's organizational skills and Garrett's hard work combined to create a successful operation that became known throughout the region for its quality horses. They hired more hands as the business grew, including Charlie Briggs as full-time foreman. They built a larger barn, expanded the house to include a proper parlor and additional bedrooms, and put down roots that went deep into the Texas soil. And 2 years after their marriage, Clara discovered she was pregnant. The fear came roaring back with a vengeance. Every symptom, every twinge sent her into a spiral of anxiety. She could not eat, could not sleep, convinced that history would repeat itself, that she would carry this baby only to lose it as she had lost the others. Garrett found her one night sitting on the porch, staring into the darkness with tears streaming down her face. "They say I'm cursed because my babies died," she cried, the words torn from her. All the old fear, all the old pain came flooding back as if it had never left. "What if I lose this one too? What if I have a boy and name him Thomas and he dies just like the first Thomas? What if the curse is real and I was fooling myself to think otherwise?" Garrett sat down beside her and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight while she sobbed against his chest. "We'll try together," he said firmly, his voice steady and sure. "Listen to me, Clara, you are not cursed. You were never cursed. You lost 3 babies and that was a tragedy beyond words, but hope is healthy and strong. You have kept her alive and well for over 2 years now. There is no curse. There is just life, and sometimes life is hard, and sometimes we lose people we love. But we cannot stop trying, we cannot stop hoping, we cannot stop living." "I am so afraid," Clara whispered. "I know, so am I. After I lost Margaret and the baby, I swore I would never risk that kind of pain again. But then you came along, and you showed me that love is worth the risk, that building a life with someone is worth the possibility of losing them. And this baby, this child we made together, is worth every moment of fear, because we are going to love him or her with everything we have, and we are going to believe, truly believe, that everything will be all right. What if it is not? Then we will survive it," Garrett said, "together. The way we survive everything. But Clara, you have to stop expecting disaster. You have to start believing that good things can happen to you, that you deserve happiness and healthy children and a long life with people you love." "I do not know if I can," Clara said brokenly. "Yes, you can," Garrett said. "You are the strongest woman I know. You have already survived the worst. Now it is time to live for the best." He held her through the night, and slowly, gradually, Clara's fear subsided to a manageable level. She could not make it disappear entirely, but she could choose not to let it control her. She could choose to hope. The pregnancy progressed normally. Clara saw the doctor in town regularly, and he pronounced her healthy and the baby strong. Mrs. Hoffman came out to the ranch often to check on her and provide encouragement. Maria Alvarez, who had become a good friend, shared her own experiences with pregnancy and childbirth, helping Clara feel less alone, and Garrett was there every step of the way. He never dismissed her fears, but he also never indulged them. He was steady and calm and absolutely convinced that everything would be fine. His faith gave Clara strength when her own wavered. In the autumn of 1881, Clara went into labor. Garrett sent Charlie racing into town for the doctor and Maria, then stayed by Clara's side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, encouraging her through every contraction. "You can do this," he said over and over. "You are strong, you are brave. We are going to meet our baby soon." The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Clara was sure something was wrong, that she was going to lose this child too, that the curse was real after all. But then the doctor was telling her to push, and Garrett was right there beside her, and suddenly there was a baby's cry filling the room. "A boy," the doctor announced, placing the squalling infant on Clara's chest. "A healthy baby boy." Clara stared down at the tiny, perfect face, at the eyes that were trying to open, at the small mouth working as he cried. He was breathing, moving, alive. "He is all right," she asked, her voice shaking. "He is perfect," the doctor assured her. 10 fingers, 10 toes, good color, strong lungs. A fine, healthy boy. Clara looked up at Garrett, who was staring at their son with tears streaming down his face. "We did it," she whispered. "We have a baby, a living, breathing baby." "What should we name him?" Garrett asked, his voice choked with emotion. Clara thought about Thomas, Mary, and Samuel, thought about the babies she had lost, the grief she had carried. And then she thought about hope, about this ranch, about the life she had built from the ashes of tragedy. "Daniel," she said, "it means God is my judge. I want him to know that we do not fear judgment anymore, that we believe in grace." "Daniel Stone," Garrett said, trying it out. "I like it. It is strong." Daniel thrived from the beginning. He nursed well, slept reasonably well, and grew fat and healthy. Each day that passed was a miracle to Clara, each week a victory. She waited for the fever to come, for the shadow of death to creep close, but it never did. Hope adored her baby brother and was constantly wanting to help care for him. She would bring him toys, sing to him in her childish voice, and kiss his cheeks with great enthusiasm. Watching her daughter with her son, Clara felt her heart heal in ways she had not known were still broken. When Daniel was 3 months old, Clara finally allowed herself to believe. The curse was truly broken. She was not a bringer of death. She was a mother, a wife, a woman who had survived unimaginable loss and come through the other side to find joy again. She was standing in the kitchen one morning, holding Daniel while Hope played at her feet when Garrett came in from his work. He stopped in the doorway, just looking at them, and his smile was brighter than the sun streaming through the windows. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked. "That I am the luckiest man alive," he said simply. "That I have everything I ever wanted right here in this room." "I love you," Clara said, the words coming easily now. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Garrett said, crossing the room to gather all of them into his arms. "My beautiful, brave, amazing wife." They stood there together, a family forged in the crucible of grief and loss but made stronger for it. And Clara knew with absolute certainty that she was finally home. Over the next several years, the Stone family continued to grow and flourish. Clara had 2 more children, a daughter they named Grace, born in 1883, and another son they named Jacob, born in 1886. Each pregnancy was easier than the last, each birth less fraught with fear. Clara learned to trust her body, to trust that life could be sustained, that her children would grow and thrive. Hope turned into a beautiful, spirited girl who loved horses as much as her father did. Daniel was thoughtful and quiet, always observing the world around him with serious eyes. Grace was adventurous and fearless, climbing everything she could reach and giving Clara heart palpitations on a regular basis. And Jacob was sunny and cheerful, laughing at everything and bringing joy wherever he went. The ranch became one of the most successful in the region. Garrett's horses were sought after throughout Texas and beyond, and the cattle operation provided steady income. They employed a dozen hands at any given time, and during roundup and branding, twice that many. Clara managed the household and the books with equal efficiency, and together she and Garrett built something that would last for generations. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1889, Garrett surprised Clara with a trip to San Antonio. Mrs. Hoffman agreed to watch the children, and for 3 days, Clara and Garrett were just a couple, walking the streets of the city, dining in restaurants, attending the theater, and remembering what it was like to be young and in love without the responsibilities of family and ranch weighing on them. On their last night, as they sat in the courtyard of their hotel under a canopy of stars, Garrett took Clara's hand. "Do you remember the night I proposed?" he asked. "Of course." It was cold and clear, and Hope was just a baby, and I was terrified. "You said yes anyway," Garrett said. "You were brave enough to take a chance on us, even though you were scared. That is one of the things I love most about you, your courage." "I did not feel courageous," Clara admitted. "I felt like I was jumping off a cliff and hoping someone would catch me." "I caught you," Garrett said. "And you caught me, we caught each other." "Yes," Clara agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We did." "I want you to know something," Garrett said. "I want you to know that marrying you, building this life with you, has been the greatest joy of my existence. I never thought I would be happy again after Margaret, but you showed me that the heart has infinite capacity for love, that we do not have to choose between honoring the past and embracing the future. We can do both." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "You saved my life," she said softly. "When I came to redemption, I was so broken. I thought I would never be whole again, but you gave me work and purpose and love. You gave me children who lived. You gave me a home. You gave me myself back." "We saved each other," Garrett corrected. "That is what love does. It heals. It rebuilds. It makes us better than we were alone." They kissed under the stars, and Clara marveled at how far they had come. From two broken people who had lost everything, they had become a family, a partnership, a love story for the ages. The years continued to pass in the way they do, marked by harvests and holidays, by birthdays and milestones, by the ordinary miracles of daily life. Hope grew into a young woman who could ride and rope as well as any cowboy on the ranch. Daniel showed an aptitude for working with numbers and began helping Clara with the books. Grace learned to cook and garden and had a gift for healing, often helping care for sick animals or injured ranch hands. Jacob was still young but already showing signs of having his father's way with horses. Clara sometimes thought about Thomas, Mary, and Samuel, the babies she had lost so long ago. The grief was no longer sharp and overwhelming, but had mellowed into a bittersweet ache, a remembrance of love that had been real even if it had been brief. She had placed a small marker for them in the family cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch, and she would visit sometimes, telling them about their siblings, about the life she had built, about how she had survived. One spring day in 1892, when Hope was 14 and Jacob was 6 and Clara was 46 years old, she stood on that hill looking out over the ranch that had become her kingdom. The house sprawled below, large and welcoming, with smoke curling from the chimney. The corrals were full of horses. The fields were green with new growth. Her children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the wind. Garrett came up the hill to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist in the easy, comfortable way of people who have loved each other for years. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different my life is now from what I thought it would be," Clara said. "When I left Missouri, I thought I was cursed. I thought I was meant to be alone and grieving forever. I could not imagine that happiness was possible. And now? Now I know that curses are not real," Clara said. "Or if they are, they can be broken by love and courage and choosing to try again. I am not cursed. I never was. I was just a woman who had terrible luck and who believed what cruel people told her about herself." "You are the strongest person I know," Garrett said, "and the bravest, and I am grateful every single day that you walked into redemption when you did." "Me too," Clara said. "Me too." They stood together in the fading light, watching their children, counting their blessings, and knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together. The way they always had. The way they always would. Because that was what they had promised each other on a cold December night so many years ago, when he had asked her to marry him and she had said yes despite her fears. "We'll try together." And they had. And the trying had been worth it. Clara had left behind the woman who believed herself cursed, who carried death in her wake, who could not imagine a future beyond grief. She had become a woman who knew her own strength, who had raised healthy, happy children, who had built a life worth living. As the sun set over the Texas prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Clara Whitmore Stone smiled. She was home, she was loved, she was free, and she had never been cursed at all, The final years of Clara's life were peaceful and full. She lived to see her children grown and settled. Hope married a neighboring rancher and gave Clara 4 grandchildren. Daniel went to university in Austin to study law and eventually became a lawyer in San Antonio, though he visited the ranch often with his wife and 2 children. Grace married the local doctor and had 3 children of her own, and she used her healing gifts to help women in childbirth throughout the region. Jacob took over the running of the ranch with Garrett, proving to have an even better hand with horses than his father. On a warm summer evening in 1904, Clara sat on the porch of the ranch house surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She was 68 years old now, her hair more silver than dark, her face lined with age but still beautiful. Garrett sat beside her, his hand clasped in hers, his own hair white and his body a bit more stooped than it had been, but his eyes still that same clear blue that had first captured her attention so many years ago. Hope, now 36 and heavily pregnant with her 5th child, approached her mother with a concerned expression. "Mama, are you feeling all right? You look tired." "I am just taking it all in," Clara said, gesturing to the chaos of children playing in the yard, adults talking and laughing, the ranch spread out before them in the golden light of evening. "Looking at everything we built, everything we have." "You and Papa built something amazing," Hope said, sitting down on the porch steps. "You gave us all a wonderful life." "We gave each other a wonderful life," Clara corrected, squeezing Garrett's hand. "Your father and I, we saved each other, and then we built all of this together." That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Clara and Garrett sat together on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, the air was sweet with the scent of honeysuckle, and the world was quiet except for the rustle of wind in the grass. "Do you remember the day I arrived in Redemption?" Clara asked. "I was so lost, so broken, I thought my life was over." "I remember," Garrett said. "And I remember thinking, when I first saw you looking at that saloon like you were considering going in, that you were someone who needed saving." "Did you save me?" Clara asked. "No," Garrett said. "You saved yourself, I just gave you a place to do it." Clara smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "We saved each other," she said. "That is the truth of it. 2 broken people who found each other and built something whole." "The best thing I ever did was ask you to marry me," Garrett said. "The best thing I ever did was say yes," Clara replied. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who had loved each other through joy and sorrow, through fear and hope, through the building of a life that would outlast them both. And when Clara finally went to sleep that night, it was with a smile on her face and Garrett's hand in hers, knowing that she had lived a life worth living. She had broken the curse. She had raised children who lived and thrived. She had loved a good man and been loved in return. She had built a home and a legacy. And most importantly, she had learned that she was never cursed at all. She had just been afraid, and rightfully so after all she had endured. But fear had not won. Love had won. Hope had won. Life had won. Clara Whitmore Stone lived for another 10 years, seeing more grandchildren born, celebrating Hope's daughter graduating from the new women's college in Austin, attending Daniel's appointment as a judge, watching Grace open a women's clinic in Redemption, and seeing Jacob expand the ranch to twice its original size. She died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, with Garrett holding her hand just as he had held it on their wedding day. At her funeral, the church was packed with people whose lives she had touched. Ranch hands who had worked for her and Garrett for decades. Women she had helped through difficult pregnancies, teaching them that babies could live, that hope was not foolish. Young people who remembered her kindness, her strength, her refusal to be defined by tragedy. And Hope, standing at the front of the church with her own children and grandchildren around her, spoke about the woman who had found her as an abandoned baby and had chosen to love her, to raise her, to give her a life. "My mother was the bravest person I ever knew," Hope said, her voice strong despite her tears. "She lost everything, but she did not let that loss define her. She chose to try again, to love again, to hope again." She taught me that we are not limited by our past, that we can always start over, that love is always worth the risk. I am who I am because she found me and chose me, because she and my father showed me what real love looks like. They tried together, and because they did, all of us are here today. Garrett sat in the front pew, his weathered hands folded, his eyes full of tears. He had loved Clara for 35 years, and he would miss her for however many years he had left. But he did not regret a single moment, not the fear, not the risk, not the vulnerability of loving again after loss. Because Clara had been worth it. Their life together had been worth it, and the legacy they had built would continue long after they were both gone. He thought back to that day in 1878 when he had seen a lost young woman standing in front of a saloon in Redemption, looking like she had reached the end of her rope. He had offered her a job, never imagining that he was offering her a future, a family, a love that would define the rest of his life. And he thought about the night she had broken down, crying that she was cursed, that her babies had died, that she was afraid to hope. He had held her and told her they would try together, and they had, and it had been the best decision of his life. After the funeral, after the mourners had left, Garrett climbed the hill to the family cemetery. Clara was buried there now, next to the small marker she had placed so many years ago for Thomas, Mary, and Samuel. Her stone was simple, bearing her name, her dates, and the words beloved wife and mother. She chose love over fear. Garrett stood there for a long time, remembering, grieving, and also celebrating, because Clara's life had not been defined by the 3 babies she had lost, tragic as that was. It had been defined by the 5 children she had raised, the man she had loved, the life she had built from the ruins of her past. She had not been cursed. She had been human. She had suffered and survived. She had grieved and healed. She had been afraid and found courage. She had been broken and rebuilt herself into something strong and beautiful and lasting. As the sun set over the ranch that Clara and Garrett had built together, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Garrett whispered a final goodbye to his wife. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for trying with me. Thank you for showing me that love is worth the risk. Thank you for 35 years of joy. I will love you until my last breath, and when I see you again, I will tell you all about how our legacy continued. How our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren thrived, how the ranch prospered, how the life we built together lasted long after we were gone. Rest easy, my love. You did good. We did good, together." The wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and the distant sound of laughter from the house below where the family had gathered. Life continued. Love continued. Hope continued. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go when they leave this world, Clara Whitmore Stone smiled, knowing that she had lived a life worth living, that she had overcome the curse of fear and grief to embrace love and hope, that she had tried and succeeded and left the world better than she had found it. She had been a woman who lost everything and found it again. A woman who was told she was cursed but proved them wrong. A woman who chose to love despite the risk, to hope despite the fear, to try despite the possibility of failure. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy of all. Not the ranch, not the money, not even the children and grandchildren, though all of those mattered, but the example she had set. The proof that curses can be broken, that grief can be survived, that love is always worth the risk. They had said she was cursed because her babies died, but they were wrong. She was never cursed. She was blessed, blessed with love, with courage, with a second chance at life. And she had taken that chance and made something beautiful from it. She had tried. Together with Garrett, she had tried. And together, they had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams.